Alrighty, it's Monday, and I am working on this whole delay thing between two screens, so I apologize. And I'm actually just going to kind of go with it still. So, anyway, happy Monday. It is Celiac Awareness Month. Today is day 6 in Celiac Awareness Month. So, today's topic: how does it suddenly appear? And when this diagnosis happens, there's a lot of people that have frustration with the fact that their friends, family, loved ones want to call BS on it. And I understand that, and I experienced that as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I'm going to have a slight squirrel moment to address some questions because I do have a little update on my daughter. Kind of celiac related, but not completely. I will get into my full story on how I was diagnosed and how it kind of ties in a little bit later on another episode. But today, for those of you that may or may not know, my daughter experienced a seizure at school on March 28th. She had apparently been having seizures. We had no clue. We thought it was some attention issues. So I did not know that this was going on. We've gone through an EEG. We started our own medicine. We've adjusted her 504 at school. If this makes sense with you, if you know what I'm talking about, then that's awesome. If you don't, then it's okay. I'm not going to get into all the details of that, but we've definitely been moving on and moving along pretty quickly. And I have 2 updates for you. One is, people are constantly asking, how's she doing? And it's so hard to answer that question because how is she doing? Well, we didn't realize she was having the absence seizures to start with, so it's really hard to answer that question. But part of what we have as far as her 504 at school is that we do have monitoring and tracking for noticing when an absence seizure happens. We've clearly defined what an absence seizure looks like and how it's different from just a child daydreaming. And we get a weekly tally of that. So last week we had some issues with her medicine. We decided to kind of slow down on the titration of it. But she did have one absence seizure last week at school. And so I have been in communication with her neurologist. And the other update is that one of the things we really wanted was to have more complete data to know what we're working with. And so we have our 48-hour EEG scheduled. It was scheduled in 2 weeks, and I got a call this morning that we're actually able to get that done next week. So I'm looking forward to that because I want to be able to have more answers. So anyway, like I said, when I get into my story on another episode, it will explain kind of how all this ties in together. But anyway, today's focus is on celiac and how does it suddenly appear? And, much like other diagnoses, when you go to the doctor, sometimes you expect to, usually with celiac, you're looking for something that's going on. You're looking for an answer as to what's been going on. But, I want you to think about your friends or maybe if you don't have celiac, if you're somebody that has another health issue. A couple of health issues that are very common in our country, in the U.S., high blood pressure, high cholesterol, those are definitely very common issues. And those seem to be easy for people to manage because they're like, oh, well, I can just take a pill for that. Well, as some of you guys know, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep for 17 years before I became a certified health and wellness coach. And here's one of the things that a lot of people ignore. There's other advice that happens when you go to the doctor's office. Not only do they talk to you about that, but usually medicine is after they have talked to you about diet and lifestyle changes, diet, lifestyle, exercise, and some attitude. They're usually trying to get you to work on that, but they simply don't have the same amount of time to dedicate. But if you have high blood pressure, then you have probably been told by your doctor that you need to reduce your salt intake. If you have high cholesterol, you've probably been told to reduce your fat intake. We're not getting into a big old debate about keto and all that stuff. But my point is that if you've had one of those diagnoses, your doctor most likely has also had a discussion with you about some other food changes that needed to happen. The difference is that when it comes to high blood pressure and high cholesterol, unlike celiac disease, if you don't follow the doctor's orders, the repercussions of it are not likely going to be immediate. With celiac, the repercussions of not following the doctor's orders may or may not be immediate. It just depends on the person. Some people are symptomatic, some people are asymptomatic. But it's hard for people to understand because this person that, I loved regular pizza. I love pasta. I love desserts. I have such a sweet tooth. That's just truth here. And I still remember when my belly dancing teacher told me that she was diagnosed with celiac back when I was in my 20s. And I remember looking at her going, gosh, I'm so sorry for you. I can't imagine having to give up all of my sweets, my pizza, my pasta, my cupcakes. I ate those words later because I did have to figure out how to change and eat differently. Um, but the thing is, when it comes to celiac, there isn't a medicine for it. The only prescription for it is a dietary change, and it is a mandated one. And yes, it requires the same detail as if you're dealing with a food allergy. So you have to suddenly worry about cross-contamination. And that person that maybe just was eating whatever for one day, the next day, suddenly they're having to read all these labels and they're having to ask all these questions. And maybe you're trying to go out to eat with them and you might be getting really frustrated. And you're like, dude, I've known you your whole life. You've never had these issues. Why do you suddenly have to worry about it? You've never had any problems. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to celiac, the symptoms aren't something that we tend to discuss over dinner. Digestion is not something that a lot of people tend to talk about. They don't tend to talk about, unless you're talking about older people or babies, those are usually the two times, I know I've covered this a little bit, but those are usually the two times where it's okay to talk about like bowel movement habits. You don't just start conversations with most people like, hey, how you doing today? Oh my God, I have been so constipated. I haven't pooped in like 5 days. Your friends are not likely to have that conversation with you, nor are they likely to tell you, oh dear God, I've had the worst case of diarrhea. Unless they have the flu, and then they're usually going to still talk around it. But here's the thing with celiac. That's a lot of what their life can revolve around if they are symptomatic. For me, I would have 2 BMs a month, or not a month, sorry, 2 BMs a week. I was uncomfortable. I weighed 125 pounds at 5'6", 5'6.5", and still would look bloated. I would still look a few months pregnant. 5'6" and 125 pounds, that's not the formula for expecting somebody to look like they're pregnant. But I would because I had those issues. But it just wasn't something that was talked about. That's just not common conversation. And usually, unless somebody really gets into it, or if somebody's given, that person who has celiac a whole lot of slack, they're probably not as comfortable talking about it. Now, it depends on where they are in it. I have sold medicine for so many different disease states that I've become way more comfortable talking about bodily functions than I was in my 20s when I was a pharmaceutical sales rep. When it comes to digestion, I've decided that it's not worth trying to sugarcoat it because the only way people are going to understand is to actually have some open conversations, whether they're comfortable or not. I'm comfortable with it. If you're not comfortable with it, then I apologize. But I'm going to have that conversation because if you're going to ask me, then you need to understand what kind of door you're opening. I'm going to tell you what's actually going on. But there are a lot of people who just aren't comfortable with that. So the person that you're talking to, it didn't suddenly appear. To them, they probably have a huge sense of relief and overwhelm at the same time because they're excited that they know what's going on, they know what's been triggering it, and they have an answer, they have a definitive solution. I'll talk about food labeling on another day because that definitive solution isn't as definitive as we think it is. It's actually a little bit more complicated. So anyway, but it doesn't just suddenly appear. And then yesterday I spoke a little bit about the different autoimmune disorders or the different illnesses that usually can trigger it. A lot of the time when people are diagnosed with celiac, it is after having something else that wreaked havoc on the immune system that triggered the symptoms of celiac disease. So there are people that suffer with the symptoms of celiac for years and years and they have no clue. They have just learned to be comfortable being completely uncomfortable and to not talk about it. There are others where maybe they are more proactive. Maybe they get diagnosed pretty quickly because there was a traumatic event, a major illness, something that really wreaked havoc on the immune system that triggered the celiac to develop. So the answer is, how did it suddenly appear? In some people it did, in some people it didn't. So it depends on the person. And I know I talked a little bit about my daughter yesterday. So I know it's hard if you love somebody or you're friends with somebody who has celiac disease and it's overwhelming. Please just be supportive of them. It is overwhelming, and I can promise you that as overwhelmed as you feel with hearing about it, the person who's dealing with it feels way more overwhelmed with having to even bring it up. They don't want to have to say, oh gosh, let me see if I can go out to eat there. You know what? They want to be able to go out to eat wherever you want to go out to eat, most likely. They don't want to have limits on their food intake. They don't want to have those limits. And so when somebody says, how did it suddenly appear? It's a little intimidating. And it can be hard to respond to that because people are trying to understand, are you curious or are you doubting that person? And maybe if you're trying to be curious, if you're trying to better understand, just to frame it a little bit that way, that would help the person. When somebody's first diagnosed, it's a lot to learn. So anyway, that is today's Celiac Awareness Month education. And tomorrow, see, the good bad news is I didn't actually have to have notes for today. But for tomorrow, tomorrow's topic is why you can't cheat. So we'll get into that. Why you can't just have a little bit of gluten when you have celiac. We'll get into that one tomorrow. We'll also get into a little bit about labeling tomorrow as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you find this helpful, then please share it with others. If there's something you want me to cover in the daily Celiac Awareness Month Go Lives, please type it in the comments. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have an amazing rest of your day.